What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Brazos Sports Prepscast. I'm Alex Miller, joined always by Jake Weiss and Andrew Tinio. Guys, starting to get a little real. We got some district play happening this week. We've got some pretty big non-district games and also a couple of pretty interesting local games down at the private school ranks.
I've been pulling out my hair trying to pick teams this week.
Yeah, I talked to Coach Pryor after the Magnolia win last week, and he was, and I was talking to him about, hey, you feel like you just got started, but now you got to feel like you're 0-0 again with district. It feels kind of weird, and so that's kind of the same feeling for me. If we just got started, but for some teams, it's go time. It's 0-0 time. It's back. It's in district.
Yeah, let's start with College Station and A&M Consolidated because they're the ones starting district play this week, and both of them have pretty good matchups. Start with the Tigers, okay? They're leading off the week. They're playing Thursday night, actually, at Pflugerville Weiss. Jake, you're going to be there.
The field.
Yeah, the field. The field.
I usually just call it the P field. So.
Hey, trivia for you. What school does A&M Consolidated play in the TV show Friday Night Lights?
Oh, this is an easy one. Arnett Meade.
Yeah. Did you know that, Andrew?
No.
Have you seen Friday Night Lights?
I don't think I've seen it that far to know that.
They are the Dillon Panthers' arch bitter rival.
I'm rewatching it right now, actually.
Are you?
Yeah, I am.
Have you gotten to the Mud Bowl yet?
No. I just got to what playoffs? They just started playoffs.
Because I think
season 1.
is the Mud Bowl the one that they rematch against Arnett Meade? Which is the one that they play the Brant Vikings? It's one of the playoff episodes.
They haven't gotten there yet. Then it might be like the next one.
Okay. So I'm giving spoilers.
Yeah,
out.
spoilers for Andrew.
Jeez,
I don't think I've gotten that far, but
it's
all right.
Hey, fun fact: Brant Vikings, the Bryan Vikings. In case you couldn't pick up on what I was saying. Anyway, there's going to be a real football game this week. Matt Sarensen is not suiting up, but yeah, this is a good test, I think, for A&M Consolidated going into this game. Jake, what's kind of the vibe over there at Tigerland?
Yeah, so it's funny. Right before we started, I'm writing a story on a guy you got to see in action, Wesley Couch. He had a big game last week, and I think they're going to need his big game ability once again this week because, especially on defense, talked to Coach Schmidt, and one of the big things he said was, hey, this is probably one of the best wide receiver groups we're going to face this season. And I think we've talked before on the podcast kind of about how, we weren't sure about Consol's secondary to start the year because, it's a bunch of new faces. How are they going to do? Another big test for them here early on. But, hey, I don't know. I mean, you were at the game. I feel like Forney was a pretty good matchup for that defense. I mean, what did you think about that?
Yeah, Forney was really committed to running the ball in a lot of ways. They got some big plays through the air. Like when they passed, they got some big shots downfield. But, credit to Consol. There were some moments where Forney could have really stuck it to him, and Consol held their own. And I think that's a testament to what they have in the front seven. I think as long as Consol's front seven continues to do what they have been doing, it's going to make up for giving up a big play here or there in the secondary because they're that talented up front. And Wesley Couch, he might have made one of the plays of the night.
Yeah.
Forney's going down trying to take the lead in the fourth quarter, and he just, finds a guy in a gap and nearly blows his head off, hitting him square up right there at the 10-yard line. Kind of halted their momentum, really, I think, got the fire going in Consol's defense to make one more stand. And then Forney, of course, misses the what would have been a go-ahead field goal with a couple minutes to go. So, yeah, Consol's defense gonna get a good test. Pflugerville Weiss, they got DJ Duger from Leander Glenn, the guy that they're pretty familiar with.
I was going to say, College Station Consol were probably like, hey, we don't have to go up against that guy again. And then they start looking down the roster and go, oh, my,
yeah,
can't believe this.
Yeah. Weiss, though, they won District 12-6A last year, which we know was not a powerhouse among Class 6A. But, hey, you're still a district champion coming down from Class 6A. And they kind of ran through that district, too, last year.
Yeah.
So I think this is a really good team that Consol is going to have to play on Thursday night.
And I want to make one other note. It's kind of funny you mentioned DJ there because I was like, oh, the run game. But the other thing I think on offense that Schmidt and I talked about was for Consol, they've had some pretty good moments in the run game, but they really want to establish a consistent run game this week against Pflugerville-Weiss.
Yeah. College Station, they're hosting Austin Anderson Friday night. The Cougars, Andrew, you were out there at Magnolia last week. A little more balance between the run and the pass game. What'd you see from the Cougars on offense particularly?
I mean, yeah, I think there was a little bit more balance. It was actually a little interesting nugget. Keaton Johnson actually got some playing time, and I was unsure. I was like, is there something wrong with Cade? But I talked to Coach afterwards. He was talking about, getting him in those moments where it's not a super dire situation. It's getting him comfortable with playing in that varsity type feel. I thought was really, really cool. I know we may talk about it later, the Terrence Lewis catch. I also had one of our own at the College Station game with the Wortham having his own way, deflecting in the air and falling into Verdugo's lap, which was actually an important play at the time. Magnolia did a really good job of running the ball, and College Station kind of struggled with Magnolia's toughness and the way they were finding holes in between tackles. So it was 28-21 at that point. Hail Mary happens. Momentum kind of shifts, and then the game kind of becomes similar to what it was last year's area round. But obviously, the Corker and the Kozer connection still pretty strong. Had found the end zone 3 times there. I think the running game had times where it was the well was a little bit dry, but I think throughout the game, I think the toughness of College Station's offensive line kind of showed, and it gave the running backs more holes to run through.
Yeah, I got to talk to Wilson Stapp, College Station's senior running back. They got 3 senior running backs, by the way.
Three-headed monster.
Three-headed monster, and they're all very different from each other. But doing a feature on Wilson this week, and I think he was pretty frank. Like the rushing totals aren't what they would have hoped through the first 2 games, but Coach Pryor told me, hey, whereas maybe teams are a little more committed to stopping the run, knowing what College Station has to offer on that part of their offense, it's really opened up some passing lanes, and we've seen a guy like Zach Kosser really turn it on early. I mean, he's over 335 yards receiving. I mean, if that's not leading the Brazos Valley, then we need to be talking about the guy who is. So, I think that he said that it might yo-yo a little bit where, as teams maybe start focusing in on a guy like Zach who has shown some explosive playmaking ability, maybe that opens up some run lanes where they don't have as many guys in the box, and you've got some capable running backs to do some good things in the run game. So, Anderson's another team dropping down from Class 6A to Class 5A, and, I think College Station's looking to get on the right foot. I think it helps both teams that they've got really solid matchups to start district play, because I don't know if y'all knew this, but they play each other next week, and I'm sure our episode next week will focus on that a lot.
Perhaps.
All right. Well, hey, Brian kind of hit a rough spot last week in the second half against Huntsville. Jake, you were over there. What kind of went wrong for the Vikings in a game that kind of got away from them?
Yeah, Coach and I actually talked about this, I guess 2 days ago, a day ago, and we just kind of he just kind of said, and hey, we just had a couple things go wrong. They felt like they were in there, and if you look at the halftime score, they were. It was 21-14. Brian had gone down the field too late in the first half there, and I think they had like a 4th and short. And they had a direct snap to Terrence Lewis. I'm sure they were going to either do a jet sweep or he was just going to take it himself. It was like 4th and 1. They get a delay of game. Obviously, that puts you back to 5 yards. Then you got to try to kick a field goal. I think they missed the field goal. So then they go down in the half, and they're down 7 instead of, let's see here, it would have been 5. Yeah, it would have been 5. Had to do the math in my head.
Math is hard.
Should have wrote it down, actually, the equation there. Help me out. But
show your work, Jake.
Exactly. Need my pen there. But no, that was just one of the things that for me, that kind of just highlighted like the big issue for Brian. Like Huntsville's a capable team. I mean, heck, they were 3 rounds away from state last year. So I don't think it's time to hit the panic button or anything. Brenham's kind of an interesting matchup because Huntsville, especially in the second half, was really able to get it going on the ground. Both with they put in a new quarterback who pretty much just they gave him the ball. Ton of speed, and they would just say, hey, here's a direct snap. Don't even think about passing it. Just take off. or give it to your running back and see what you can do. So they got Brenham, obviously. We've talked about Jacoby Dixon a bunch on the podcast before. So that's like a matchup that I'm real curious. Like, how can Brian's defense kind of respond against Jacoby Dixon and Brenham this week?
Yeah. I think this is a big game for both Brenham and Brian. Brenham kind of gutted out that win over Huntsville in week 1. Kind of rolled through Houston Sterling last week. And, Dixon's a guy that we've talked about on this podcast is kind of the next big thing around here, it seems like. So, well, Rudder, they're facing Pflugerville-Connolly. Hey, shout out to the Rangers. Found a way to win against El Campo. That's a big win for them. El Campo's a really solid program down at the 4A level. Yep. Andrew, I think you got to talk with good old Jaquise Martin this week.
I sure did.
Did you ask him who the real number 1 is?
I did not get the chance to yet. I'm sure that'll still be a conversation throughout the year, though, either on the field here or in the video games. We'll see. We'll see how that is with the new college football video game.
We talked about that this week, me and Terrence Lewis.
What did you have to say about it?
Well, I just told him, and actually credit to our sports editor, Robert Cessna there. He kind of helped stir the pot because I told him I was going to talk to Terrence, and he was like, well, did you know Jaquise is leading in stats right now, receiver? He's like, you should let him know.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So Terrence said, though, hey, they're brothers, obviously. It's all in good fun. But he did say, wait till about week 5. He's going to take the lead back, he said.
Yeah, but I talked to Jaquise, and he was talking about it feels like a player-led team. It feels like there's not much going on in terms of, outside business. They're really focusing on getting things handled on the football fields, and that's really kind of showed in the first few weeks with West Fork and with El Campo. I talked to Izar as well. He's mentioning about, this team has gotten down, but they haven't let that play go out in a negative way. They've kind of responded to it in situations last year. Maybe if, a couple things went wrong, it kind of turned to a snowball effect. Here this year, it's been kind of the opposite. And that was the big thing that Jaquise was talking about, just a player-led team. And I mean, his connection with Javen Jesse has just been, one of the best in the area. You're talking about Kosser leading the BV in stats. I think Jaquise has an argument there as well, alongside T-Lou. But that was just something that really stood out to me when talking to Jaquise, which it just feels like a player-led team. When
Rudder made the playoffs a couple years back, that was a very player-led team that had really good leadership, whether it was E.J. Izar or M.J. Hurd. And so, Rudder kind of having that, I think, is a big deal for them, especially with them. Their goal this season is to get back to the playoffs. And, I think that's a very attainable goal for them, of course. And so having that leadership, I think, will go a long way for Rudder as the season progresses for sure.
And it's mentioned in my story that I'm having on Jaquise, but a big part of that 2021 getting to that playoff spot was Jaquise's touchdown catch in the Huntsville game as a freshman. And so that was kind of a growing moment for him, and he's kind of just continued to blossom since then.
Well, we got some really good area games. Let's start down at the private school level first. Hey, we got an area-on-area matchup at the 6A or 6-man ranks, I should say. We've been talking about 6A football. Now we're going down to 6-man. The diversity of Brazos Valley football and Bryan College Station football. Allen Academy playing BV Chia this week.
Yep.
This is, I think this is a big test for both squads going into this one.
I think BV Chia kind of surprised people with that St. Joseph's win on week 1, especially with how good St. Joseph was last year. So I'm really interested. It's kind of a little bit of a bitter rivalry one way or another. BV Chia got the win last year, so curious to see how this turns out.
Coin flip for me. This is one of the ones, like I said at the beginning, this is one of the games that I've been pulling my hair out over. I'm real torn on who I think is going to win. It's interesting too because for BV Chia, they haven't had a game since week 1.
Yeah, they were off last week.
They were off last week. Allen Academy's played 2. They're 1-1. Real interesting. And apparently they just moved the matchup back to Baker Field, Allen Academy's home, which is funny because they both used to use that field. So it's kind of like College Station. Speaking of College Station Consol, it's kind of like when they play because it's kind of like a home game every time. But enough people show up, it kind of ends up being more of a neutral site game.
Yeah. Well, that'll be a good one over at Baker Field. Brazos Christian playing Hearn over at Woodfield up in Robertson County. This is a very intriguing matchup. A game that I think they played, was it last year or the year before they started playing, and then the game got canceled. Like, they had to shut it down in like the first or second quarter.
2 years ago.
It was 2 years ago. And I think Brazos Christian was winning the game at the time.
It was like, I want to say
it was like 14-7.
Yeah.
14-7. And kind of a bummer when you're kind of getting into a game and then, oh, sorry, there's lightning, got to call it off. But I think that if Brazos Christian can go up there and get a win over Hearn, be kind of a big deal for them, getting a good feather in their cap. But if you're Hearn, had a really close loss to Burton last week and kind of a knockdown drag out kind of game. This is one that I think could really turn the sails for them if they could get a win.
And I feel like this may be the opposite. I don't think this is going to be a 6-0 game based off how Brazos Christian kind of plays their offense. Not at all.
I was going to say, this one is going to be like offense versus defense, because Hearn, they had they gave up one play, like a 76-yard touchdown pass to Burton. That's all she wrote. Brazos Christian, Cooper Murray had himself a big game. I think he had 5 touchdown passes, like 100 yards on the ground, 200-something passing yards, 100 yards on the ground. I feel like this is going to be kind of like the, brick wall or rock in a hard place. I'm trying to think of the right analogy here, like a really good, I don't know. It's been a long day, I guess. But basically, I think it's just going to be like Brazos Christian's offense. Can Hearn's defense hold up? Who's going to be kind of the first to break there, I think?
Well, we've got some other intriguing non-district games around the area this week. Guys, what's a game you got your eye on?
Ooh, Madisonville at Malakoff. I'm just interested for the Mustangs to see, they're going up against the state champs in 3A there.
Malakoff got a big win last week, too.
Yeah.
Who did they beat? I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. Was it Gunner or Salina?
I know they got a big win, too. I cannot remember off the top of my head.
I know Gunner lost last week, so that kind of sounds like, in my head, I'm like, yeah,
I'm looking it up.
Out.
I'm going to go ahead and take my pick while I'm at it. Gerald Caldwell. I think is an interesting one. I know Caldwell got the big win in week 1. They were toe to toe with Robinson. Do you got it up?
It's Lorena.
Oh,
Okay.
wow, okay.
That'll be interesting. I'm sure that'll be talked about here in a few minutes. But Caldwell went 3 quarters with Robinson. Just didn't quite finish in the 4th quarter. Kind of looking for that second win now, building momentum, potential 2-1 start to the year. I'm sure Coach Witherbox will take that any day of the week. So I'm very interested in Gerald Caldwell.
Yeah. Going back to that Madisonville Malakoff game, Madisonville was kind of in a they were in a showdown with Navasota last week, able to hang on to beat the Rattlers in kind of a rivalry game.
Philip Green
had a big game. He made the honor roll this week, of course. And Malakoff, Jake, you and I got a firsthand look at Mike Jones last year when he beat Franklin.
Man, did Malakoff, I thought, look good in that game.
Yeah.
And they don't, you kind of think, I don't want to say down at that level, you assume everybody runs the same offense, but Malakoff's too not afraid to throw it around the yard.
No.
That was kind of just their bread and butter against Franklin, I felt like. We're just kind of slinging it. Or Mike Jones, I feel like he had a couple runs, too, in that game.
Yeah. Mike Jones, dual threat quarterback, for Madisonville, it's gonna be figuring out how to contain him. That's step number 1, and then they're gonna need another big game out of Philip Green. Malakoff did a really good job slowing down Franklin's run game last year.
Yeah.
And Green's kind of the bell cow over there for the Mustangs, so they're gonna need him to put his best foot forward. They beat Lorena by 20, which is impressive in its own measure, but. Lorena on the road at Franklin this week, that's a game that, I think both sides really like playing that game, especially in non-district. Lorena, of course, going up to Class 4A this year, met twice last year. Lorena ended Franklin's insane winning streak. What was it, like 39, 40 games? 45, 43, I can't even remember. Yeah. I was there. It was a shootout. And
one on a field goal too, right?
One on a field goal at the buzzer. If I'm a betting man, I'm willing to bet this is going to be another good game on Friday night.
Yeah, it's weird because you look at Lorena and you're like, 0-2. How did they come in the game 0-2? But they've had such a tough non-district. I'm curious to see how that non-district for them kind of goes in this game to Franklin, who had a week to bye. I'm interested to see how Franklin kind of comes off a bye week, not playing in 2 weeks, and Lorena's been really tested the first few weeks.
A couple other interesting Brazos Valley matchups. Got Lexington at Rockdale. Lexington's a team we kind of have high expectations for this season. What's Rockdale have to show for this Friday, though? It's kind of what I want to see from Rockdale. Yeah. And looking at Normandy and Snook, Normandy's really looking for that win, right? And if you're Snook, it's just stacking them up, getting some confidence going as the season can go on.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting, too, for Snook for me because it's at home for them. So, and I think I want to say this is their first home game of the season. Or did they start... Was the game against Somerville to open this season? Was that at home?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure.
I feel like it was on the road. So if it's the home opener, I'm sure there'll be a lot of excitement because we're a first-year coach, too, for Snook over there. So I'm sure that's going to be one they get up for. And even if it's not the first home game, hey, it's going to be a game they get up for.
Yeah, I mean, we could continue just going down the list. I mean, this is a great slate of games this week.
Yeah.
You know, Navasota, Brookshire, or hosting Brookshire Royal.
Yeah.
You know, how do the Rattlers respond after that loss to Madisonville? Cameron at Maypearl, kind of a cross-regional matchup a little bit. That's an interesting game. You know, I think Centerville at Groesbeck is an interesting game as well, kind of a cross-classification. I'm just going down the list.
Yeah.
Leon at Wortham. I mean, I think that's a great
Yeah.
game. So this is a strong slate for the Brazos Valley this week, which, by the way, got a huge shout-out from our friends at Dave Campbell's Texas Football last week as the top region in the state. I think they got like 22 little regions that they go with, and I don't know, guys. There's some pretty good football played around here.
I was going to say, I think their metric they used in the column was the rankings, and I think, Brazos Valley already added a team to the rankings this year because Madisonville joined Class 4A D2 rankings.
Yeah, got. I think there are 6 teams in the rankings right now,
And they're all different levels too.
Yeah, you've got College Station and Consol. You got Madisonville,
Lexington.
in Lexington. You got Franklin and Bremont.
Bremont. Yeah.
So, and then I bet if you had a private school ranking, you could put Brazos Christian probably in there in the TAPS division. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was going to say, they only do a top 5 for a private school 11-man, so I'm sure if they expanded it to 10, or even, 25 for 6A, so I'm sure Brazos Christian would probably be in that top 10, and hey, if they win this week, I'm sure they'd certainly probably bump up, even if they were, let's say, right on the edge, 11 or 12, they'd get moved up to 10, I bet, if they with a win this week.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Brazos Sports Prepscast. Thanks for tuning in, and be sure to check all of our coverage of high school football in the Brazos Valley at theeagle.com. We'll see you next time.